Hello, everybody. Welcome into the DoubleEdgeFoundry, and I am Broker, and I have Aramite along with me. We are going to dive into some biblical, theological discussion. And to start off, we're just going to get into a little bit about how we ended up where we're at, and maybe that'll help to guide us through our positioning and help the audience out there understand where we're coming from, how we got to where we're at least to the best that we can. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the topic of how did I end up with my unique ideals and what got me here. So I grew up in a Christian home in a Baptist church, and for most of my life, I bounced in and out of the Baptist church. And when I grew up and got a wife and kids, I thought, I need to get back into church. I had some health issues that were slowing me down from heavy physical work. And I decided, if I can't no longer do heavy construction, maybe I can put myself to use for God. And so I went to a couple different places, found a local Baptist church that I thought a bunch of kind people there. And, it was what I was used to growing up. So I took my wife and kid to this church. And I only had one kid at this time. And I was in that church for a while, and I decided that, maybe I should become a pastor. And so I started working with the local pastor of that church, and we would have weekly meetings and read through the Bible and get into deep discussions. And he was kind of guiding me to be raised up and become a preacher through that church. And in doing so, my whole idea and background for this was I wanted to do God's will. I wanted to use my life as a vessel for God to work through. And I thought that, going into the church is the way to do that. However, it wasn't long in being led by this pastor that I realized, he's not open to any new viewpoints or any new theological understanding that I might have. And I got shot down quite a bit. And I realized, there's no need for me to pretend that I agree with everything that this pastor is teaching me so that I can, through that agreement, assume the pulpit later down the road just to, once I have the pulpit, change my mind. In other words, being untrue to reality so that I can, assume a pastor role. And so, that weighed on my mind for a while until I realized, no, I'm here to serve God. It's not, thank you. It's not that, I need to position myself with this church and their viewpoints if it's anti-God, if it goes against what God is telling me, is showing me, then it's doing me no good to forsake that knowledge, put that knowledge away, pretend that doesn't exist just so that I can get behind the pulpit and, make the pastor think that I believe what he does when in actuality I don't. So realizing that, I had to remove myself from that church. And in doing so, that was very hard on me, because not only was I taking myself out of the pastoral role that I was trying to attain through that church, I was also going against that church. And that church was the church I grew up in. It was a Baptist church. And so, a lot of people would say, well, you just go join another church. There's lots of churches out there, so just go join another one. But the things that were irking at my heart were things that most churches teach that I wasn't as clear on as I am now, but it didn't line up with what I thought was truth. And so in leaving that church, I really opened myself up to God and said, God, if I went to try to serve you and I am now, kind of excommunicated from the church I grew up in, and I was trying to be a pastor, and now the door is kind of closing for that road. And so I really prayed a lot about it. I talked to God a lot about it, and amazingly, he revealed things to me that were far beyond anything I would ever expect to learn. And so over time, it became a blessing. What really scared me walking out of that church and kind of going against not only that church and that pastor, but the whole Baptist background of my childhood and my family and how they believe. And I see such lies and deception creeping through the world, and I want to, help God. And so ultimately my heart is to find the truth and to be a witness to that truth. And it was hard for me to accept that my family and that line of church, that Baptist background, could be that off and that wrong, and that God would be okay with me going in a different direction. That was very hard for me to conceive. But as I learned to trust only in God, only in what he was telling me, and not worry about other people and the Baptist background, it was then when I started leaning on what he was telling me to do that I started getting very clear revelation. And so since leaving the church, I have become almost anti-church. I'm not completely anti-church, but it's just, I think we're so far down the wrong road that in general, mainstream Christianity is kind of a detriment, I believe, to the understanding of God to your average person. And I think that although a lot of people go to church on Sunday and say, oh, now I'm in right relationship with God because I went to church on Sunday and some pastor told me, you sounded good singing, so evidently I'm in good graces with God. But I don't believe that that's at all supposed to be the true model of Christianity. I think this is a false, hollow front that has led people to become kind of empty, hypocritical Christians. And I call them kind of like plastic Christians, a hollow, fake hypocrite who, thinks that by going to church that they are, good Christians. And, there's probably are some good Christians that go to church on Sunday. It's not that, all churches are completely wrong, but it's just, as a whole, we've really got off track in the mainstream understanding of Christianity. And again, I think that's very detrimental to people who were not brought up in the church, were not brought up talking about God. And therefore, when they look at your average plastic Christian, they see them as hypocritical, which is reality, which is true. And, Jesus says that he hates hypocrites. And I think that this is probably why, is because it's a blot on his name. It makes him look bad when in actuality, it's not him that's looking bad. It's the fake Christian that proclaims him and, blasphemes the reality. And so that's kind of my background. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to hand it over to Eremite, and we can flesh these things out a little bit deeper. But yeah, I got into serving God by going into the church and trying to submit myself under the establishment that through that and through realizing that there's no need for me to submit myself to a false reality just so that I can assume the pulpit to change the message and start preaching how I want. That would be me being deceptive to the church itself and God to assume that position. And he just showed me that, no, you need to back out of this. If you're going to serve me, you need to serve me only. And this church is not where I want you. And so now, amazingly, I kind of find myself open to all these issues that I think have led the church astray. And I think that has been very enlightening for me, in that it's allowed me to look at a lot of different understandings and the realities of our world at play. And I think that just trusting him alone and leaning on him directly has led to a lot of revelation for me. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eremite and see what he has to say about how he got where he is.
Thanks for that, broker.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think I should respond to what you said. That, I think what struck me as you were speaking was that paradigm that I think the world has kind of led us into of this false authority structuring, right?
Mm-hmm.
These were issues of authority. It seemed like that issues of your positional authority, your right to XYZ, right?
Yep.
And that's really what was striking me through what you were saying, because I'm kind of a similar position, different circumstance, but that seems really important to this, because they really want you to, like you say, we joke all the time, the plastic church, these people really think, you fit the mold, you stay rigid in that position, you serve your function, you've done your job.
Yeah.
Position secure. You are not a part to be replaced, because you're not faulty. You're not a faulty part, and that rigid plastic structuring that just fit the mold, fit what piece you need to fit, tuck into your little slot. That's a real problem. And that's one I very much relate to, in the sense that I'll kind of breeze over a good portion of my youth to say that my father comes from a bit of an agnostic position, and my mother from a very pagan position. Okay. Witchcraft, and she was gypsy folk, and my dad was just blue collar, go along to get along,
Okay.
and when I approached God, it seemed quite natural to me, the concept of God. I understood the principles of the metaphysical world versus the material world, and like my most available spiritual influence I had was a very pagan influence, right? And so in the beginning, there was this like concept of, God is everywhere and everything, and he's in this, and he is that, and this is like touching God. And it was so gross, really, and shallow and plastic, and very material, right? And whenever God revealed himself to me, he'd been calling the whole time. It was obvious. I was seeking him. And when I found him, and he had presented himself to me in his natural form, I didn't have a church to tell me who God was and what he was. I had a Bible. And in my world, I was the only one with a Bible. Nobody else gave a shit about the Bible, about that book. If anything, they were, they were in opposition to it. Friends, family, neighbors, business associates, employers, the whole lot of them.
Sure. Wow.
I was the only one. And it was, and and I was mocked, scorned, all the work for it,
Sure.
like, all the common,
Discouraged.
all common insults. Yeah. And one of the first things that, and listen, me and God got good with each other, like I was saved. Okay. I was saved from the system. God had set me free, and I had secured my ticket to heaven. Right. And I had a pretty good understanding. The first poison that ever entered my life that was able to enter was the church. It was that plastic church. It was the first poison I had ever experienced, the first doubt that had been planted, the first seeds of doubts, the first seeds of confusion, the first seeds of discouragement, the first seeds of exclusion, and all of a sudden I got people telling me I'm wrong, but they're, not telling me why. They're not backing it up. They've got their own opinions. And then the next thing I discovered was, like I had mentioned to you a time or two, that looking into prophecy, one of the first things I had a hard time understanding about prophecy was that I thought that coming into the church body, right? Because remember, I'm all out there by myself, me, God, and the Bible. And then I come into this church environment, and I was trying to piece together all these pieces, and I was trying to put them in their proper places. And what I came to discover later was, oh, dude, these chunks, this one, and this one, dude, that's for these people that believe this. And these chunks, are for these guys over here. And these chunks are for that guy, And I was like, I was sitting there with the mindset that the church was a unified body. It's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's what it was designed to be, And that was the biggest poison in my life. It completely wrecked. Because I had a structure that I had formulated, through my own study, all by myself. This is what I understood. Then the church comes in and says, oh, no, XYZ. And so I go, oh, well, okay, and I adjust XYZ, and then somebody comes and tells me, oh, no. See, you're missing XYZ. You need to put XYZ in here and then get rid of ABC. And I'm going, okay, and not realizing that we are not, in fact, a unified body. We do not, in fact, all believe the same thing. We are, in fact, quite divisive people. And that really, really, really bugged me. And it took a long time for me to rediscover the liberty in Christ, the liberty of your position, the true authority of structure. Nobody between you and God.
Right. Yep.
And when I came to terms with that, my freedom, my liberty, my clean slate, dude, I'm living on a clean slate. Nobody gets to tell me no but him. Nobody adjusts my position but him. I may take influence, me and you. I might be subject to influence.
Yeah.
But he's the one that decides, and it's between me and him. And I became a Romans 14 warrior, bro. And saying, no. You don't get to just call my good bad and my bad good. No. I will be steadfast in my faith.
Yeah.
I will. I'll keep my integrity. Thank you. And when I took that position, I became an enemy, not just to the world, but to the church.
Yeah.
And so the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And quite frankly, I haven't, it's not that I won't move my feet. It's just like, why would I leave a good bunker? Why would I leave this little pillbox? The enemy's like, come out and fight me, and I'm like, nah, I'm secure. And you're going to have to convince me otherwise. And as soon as I took that position, it became something else. And so when you're talking about your pastoralship and giving up these things in the world, these material titles, that's a very scary moment.
Yeah.
In the initial structuring of it.
Yep.
but it is ethical, it is moral, and it was righteous for you to take that type of position. Now, we could always talk about whether it was the right decisions or not, if you came to the right conclusions or not. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But the issues of conscience are so important. Your understanding of your position under God and what you will, and your accountability too, because God doesn't take accountability lightly. In fact, he doubles down on accountability. Nobody's more accountable than his people, held more accountable than his own people. Nobody.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you bringing that up as one of your primary and first things to bring up, that authority structure. And I think that's going to be a long fight.
Yes, I mean that really is the core or the heart of what I see as being big issue with mainstream, right? Is that authority structure. And like you say, there's one man, one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And that's my only mediator between me and God. And Jesus went around, in my opinion, showing us that we should set our own desires down, die to ourselves, take up the cross, and let God work through us. So I think that the key, like we're saying, is so that we're going directly to God. We're taking our the things that we worry about most, we're taking to him. And so I think that's the important thing that's kind of got lost on a lot of the plastic churches, that I think that they, they'll talk about praying to God and they'll talk about it like that a lot. But I think that there is this hollowness to it where when they have a deep theological question, or at least, throughout my upbringing and my family, a lot of times it was, I'll ask the pastor on Sunday, or, I need to talk to so-and-so about that. Now, we have our deep talks, we bounce ideas off each other, and it's always good for iron to sharpen iron. But at the same time, we need to understand that we should be first taking it to God to get an answer directly from God. And I think that we're not giving enough credence to that we have connection to God ourselves, and that he can communicate with us. He does talk to us. He has talked to me. And I think if people would understand that more, they would go to him directly more and be more trusting with him, right? And I think that a lot of Christians feel like, I am not of that level to be able to just talk with God. I need to go to the pastor. He's more studied. He's more in communication with God more and more of the time, and therefore I'll go to him, and he can help guide my understanding to God, and maybe I can get an answer there. When in actuality, all God wants is to discuss those things that are deep on your heart with you directly, not through some other man who doesn't have your upbringing, who doesn't have your understanding and basis, that can't understand what you visually see. But since you think that you can't talk to God, then God can't reveal what you are already seeing and what you're trying to get to the heart of, and you're wanting to take it to the pastor, when God could easily reveal that to you, because you're the one that's trying to get that. You're the one that already has the ingredients to produce that outcome, to make that soup. So it's you that can have the understanding. The pastor that you approach to get that understanding may never understand what you're getting at. It might be just for you. And so it is supposed to be a very personable thing. God, we're his utmost creation, right? Like, he made the trees and the animal, all that stuff has life because of God. God is spirit, and it's the spirit that gives life. And so we all experience our life through God. But I think that we were the pinnacle of his creation. And therefore he actually wants to talk to us. He actually does care about you and actually wants to be in community, wants to use you as the inlet into this world. If God can speak through me and I can go out into the world and God can speak through me to this world, well then, imagine the possibilities there, right? That's allowing God free reign down here on earth to make things happen. Whereas if you don't feel that there's that connection there, or I need to go to the pastor to, well, then God can't really work through you directly like that. You have to go to the pastor to get your under. God can't just work for you directly right now. And that, I think that's the whole key, where we've talked about where Jesus said, if these didn't cry out, the rocks would. And then we see at times animals talking to people, and like the donkey, the ass that was talking to whoever it was, I don't know, it was Balaam or who, but the donkeys, why did you hit me? And so my point to this is, I think that if we don't submit ourselves to his will, the rocks would be the next thing in line to do so. But we are his pinnacle creation. We're the ones that he wants to work through. If we just flat out won't work through him, then the rocks would cry out, because this whole thing is for God. Everything is for him, right? And so, but it's us that's denying that relationship. And if we would allow that relationship, then God's will would be being done in real time here on the earth. And I think that's the big thing that's missing, is that individual relationship with God. We all need to have it. We all need to be being led by God in our daily life. And it's every day, every moment is for him. Now, sure, I'm doing all types of things a lot of the time that maybe are not God led. Not saying everything I do is godly, but point being that I'm allowing for God to work through me if I can open myself up and listen enough. I believe that that's possible. I've seen it happen. It's already been a done thing. So the more I rely on that, I think the more can be revealed to me. And I think the less you rely on, the more you think that, I got to just go Sunday and talk to my pastor and maybe then I'll be in. That's not, you're not in communication with God. That's not a relationship where my sheep know my voice and they do my will. Where, there's a place where Jesus says, many will come to me in the day of judgment and say, Lord, Lord, did not we proclaim your name in the streets and cast out demons in your name? And your name. And he says to them, depart from me, I never knew you. Well, I think if you know him, if you're in direct communication with him and he's given you things to do and you're doing them, well, there's a relationship there. You're actually communicating with him. You hear his voice. Not only do you hear it, you do it. And therefore, he acknowledges that you just did what he wanted you to do. That's a true relationship. And he knows me because we've talked and I've done what he asked me to do. There's a true relationship there. So he can't say to me, I never knew you. No, we talked about, what we talked about just last Thursday. And so that, to me, is the bigger thing that's at play here that people are missing, is that, no, you every day are supposed to be this vessel for God. And, with him, all things are possible. So it's just between you and him, kind of the level that you take it to. But there should be something in between you two, and not just, I'm a Christian because I go to church on Sunday, therefore God's happy with me. I think that's a false narrative, a false reality, and it keeps people at a distance from God. Over to you.
I worship the God of life. And part of that is you want to see growth. change, movement, activity. You know, you want to see adoption and adaption. You know, you want to, these are things representative of life. And he talks about the lukewarm water. You know, he's got a big problem with lukewarm. And it's that stagnant attitude. Okay. And I think we really see that exemplified in the plastic church. Again, back to that rigidity. You know, you fill that form, you keep that form, it never goes anywhere, it never does anything, it never grows, you can't have a revealing if you've got everything down, secured and packed and locked in this little container box. Check, 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 you know, signed in triplicate, you know, with our mission statement on the wall.
And we all have those same checks that the pastor told off this Sunday. We all have those same checks.
And that's a problem.
Exactly.
And, you know, you know, God needs men that'll dig a hole through a wall and cook bread on poop and eat locusts in the desert. You know, he needs guys that are going to stand up and do what is contrary to normal. He's going to break that stagnant behavior, especially when we are stagnant in our filth. And that's one of the problems, you know, the living waters, flowing, cool, living water. And what did I just say about the living? You know, and what it means to live. And when you get these churches going stagnant, purposefully stagnant in their position, the water will be stagnant. The water will bring death. It won't refresh. It won't clean up. It's only going to get muddier and muddier and muddier until it is just a scum pond. And that is the danger of the church. And that's the danger of authority structures, because we got to get permissions and go through these checklists. And if it doesn't fit this box, well, dude, that's not how life works.
Right.
Anybody that's raised a garden knows. Anybody that's raised animals knows. It's not how life works. Anybody that's run a mission knows that the mission lasts about as long as it takes to turn it on, you know? And that such is life. And I worship the God of life and the living God. and so that stagnant, nasty behavior, it doesn't allow you to come to new conclusions, come to revelations. You know, nothing gets revealed, no mysteries get unpacked, you know, and the kings do nothing but sit on their fat butts, because it's up to them to seek out these mysteries, you know. And when you get rid of that authority structure and these confines and these brick walls, when you get rid of that and you just start responding to life in the moment, which is how we're told to live. You know, we're not supposed to worry about yesterday. We're not supposed to worry about tomorrow. We're not even supposed to worry about later today. What's in front of you? What has God given you, and what can you do with it? How will you respond to life in front of you?
Yes. Because
when you're dealing with an eternal God, this timeline is quite meaningless. You know, it's not really important to this moment. And maybe if we'd start all responding in these moments, we'd start having a lot more moments of change and response. But we don't, because we don't respond. We plan and remember and stay stagnant in our ways. No growth, no life, no relationship. You know, what relationship have you ever had with a person? Real relationships with a person, meaningful relationships that are the same now that where they started.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to jump into that point. I think a really big point to highlight there is the stagnant part that you're talking about and the no new revelation. See, and there's a lot of people that will say, in fact, this was a big issue for me in the church too, is, oh, well, there's no, firstly, it's Bible only, right? Like if you can't show it to someone in the Bible, they think it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe that. I think that, like you say, it's a living God. It's a at present time. It's a in real time. God is living. God is active, and therefore he can reveal something to me that has not been revealed before.
Yeah. What book did Job quote from?
Right. Exactly. And it's for some reason now that we have Jesus and the New Testament, I think, and I guess it's through the church, I don't know exactly how we got here, but I do know that there's this thought process that the Bible is God's word, and that's what he works out of. And therefore, if it's not in the Bible or some other past person hasn't talked about the same subject, then it can't be true or relevant. And I think that
the Bible's the fourth member of the Trinity, remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I want to use that the quad. We'll get into trinities and quadralities later, but
quadrality.
But yeah, it's the true in real time power that we're missing is not in the church. And I noticed this early on. Where did the power go in the church? There's no power in the church. The church is void of power. You go back to the New Testament and the disciples of the time, and I know people are going to say, oh, it's because they were seeing him and touched him. Well, okay, but the power of God has never stopped. It's us that aren't allowing for him to work through us, in my opinion. And right. I believe that God can reveal something to me about real-time life right now, and I can act, I can let God work through me and act on his behalf and have power in the outcome of what he's having me do in real time. So yeah. I believe
he's looking for the guys that didn't vote for Pharaoh.
Right.
Yeah, like, he needs that break-in change. He needs guys that'll be like, no, I don't agree. I don't agree to those established norms. I don't agree to your, got to break that. Got to break that cycle. He does all the people are way too comfortable in their positions. Sorry, it's just.
Yeah, they're too comfortable in they think that their position is correct and just sitting in that same position in the pew each Sunday. And each Sunday when they walk out, the pastor shakes their hand and says, thanks for being here. And then they get that warm and fuzzy feeling like, oh, I was in the presence of God and he's happy with me. The pastor just shook my hand and smiled at me. And therefore I'm evidently in this right relationship with God. And although I'm not saying that God is against those people, but what I am saying about it is those people aren't allowing for God to work in their everyday life because they're following that, oh, I just sit in the pew here every Sunday and get my hand shaken by the pastor, and therefore I'm in this service of God. They think that that's their service to God. No.
No, they just stay drinking milk their whole life, man. They just drink the milk the whole life. Their stomachs never go beyond the milk. And that milk just rots in the gut, man. You got to move past the milk or you'll never mature,
Yeah, and I think we look at even the term church wrong now. Like that got blown into something that was not at all the New Testament church. The New Testament church was families meeting in people's houses. It was not about a building, and now we call a lot of people, you'll hear people call a church the house of God. Oh, I've got to go to the house of God, or I was at the house of God, meaning I was at church. Well, Jesus quite clearly says, and even God in the Old Testament, when David tried to make him the temple, he said, I never wanted to live in a building. Whatever gave you that, I'll go ahead with it. Because you meant well, but I don't live in buildings. And then Jesus comes along and says, you are the temple. This temple that you guys are worshiping is going to get torn down, but the real temple is within you. And
coming from a pagan upbringing, bro, like I mentioned earlier, coming from a pagan upbringing on my mom's side, whenever I first attended a church worship service, it was very pagan to me. It was very pagan to me. It was like scary pagan. Like I felt like this is kind of what I'm recognize. Like I just got done recognizing a whole bunch of attitudes are wrong, and then I step into the place that I'm supposed to be seeing it done right, and it's every bit.
It's
It
all
made me
those
feel
things. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, what the fuck just happened? You
You've
know,
got,
like this is wrong. This isn't what. No, this is pagan. What? What?
yeah, I
This
mean, you've
isn't.
got,
No, this isn't what I was expecting to see after reading the Bible for years. You know.
yeah, we've got a
Sorry.
temple of God. We've got an altar. We've got sacrifices, and we've got whether the pastor will allow you to partake of the
Communion.
communion or not, which now the priest oversees and blesses and decides whether you can partake or not. This is
Yeah,
all
whether
you
you
can
can be
apply.
baptized or not.
Right, you can apply all of that back to pre-Christian times where you have temples and sacrifices and altars and high priests, and we were supposed to do away with all that in Christ. And now you go
Yeah.
to church, and it's the house of God with an altar, and with it's a temple, and you got a high priest, and you've got him blessing and whether you can partake in this offering or not. And it's like, whoa, wait, what timeline am I in again here? And
Yeah, for real.
So for
what
me,
God do you guys serve? This is weird.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and I think that's again where we're missing. It's that personal connection. It's not about a building or a church. The church is not a building.
It's a person.
Right. And the body of the church is the people. And we've somehow let the building creep back into our purview where, oh, we got to go to this building, the church, where there's a pastor with an altar and all these other things that we went through. And that's where we're going to find God. No, you need to find God in you. That's the key. God wants to be in you and wants to work with you and work through you. And you'll have to die to your own will. You'll have to set your life aside. You'll have to set your desires aside to let him work through you. And I think that's what Jesus was a living example of. He was always saying, not I that speak these words, but my Father speaking through me. It's not I that am doing this miracle, but my Father working through me. And I think he just showed us it is as vivid a terms as he could. It's not me that's going to speak these next words. It's God speaking through me. And so he's showing us in real time how we should live our life. And it's a God working through you, just like God worked through Jesus, and not through some building and hierarchical structure where you just sit in a pew and that's all you're good for. He wants you every day, all the people that you run into during the day in your daily routine, that's where he wants to be working. And if you don't allow him to work through you to those people, then those people aren't getting witnessed to. And you're supposed to be that temple of God witnessing to them in real time. Those people won't ever get into a church, even though that isn't what would do them any good. But if you would understand that you're the temple and God can work through you, then these people in their everyday life can be witness to God because God is working through you to them. And I think that's what we're missing.
Well, I think we see in the world right now this big delusion that's spread over the entire world, and it seems obvious to me satanic. And it's that man should have authority over other men. And to me, that's like blatantly satanic, like Luciferian in nature. Like,
Sure.
Isn't that exactly what Lucifer wanted?
Yeah.
You know, he
Yep.
just wanted control and the ability to demand the worship and demand the conclusion and demand the result and structure it. And I think the law was also represented was God's way of representing that same nature to us. Like, life is beyond control, and there's nuance to life. There's subjectivity to life. There are times where something is wrong and times where that same thing is also right. And you can't form it like this, and you can't control each other. And the delusion we fell for was that, well, men should have authority over other men. And if you look at every structure on earth, it's all designed around that, a simple issue of control, of who's in control. Somebody, some authority, and it's not God, because if you went to God, he doesn't have a problem with that. God's not telling me to drive 55 miles an hour. God would just have it that I get there safely. Politely, courteously, efficiently, swiftly, or whatever mode is good.
Yeah, and without hurting anybody else. Yeah, I would like to speak
live your life
on that.
In peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. That's your marching order, bro. That's your directive. That's your rule maker right there. How do I make a rule for this? Well, live your life in peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And this is the completion of the law. What am I supposed to do with it? Go live your life in peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Well, how do I know if it's right or wrong? Well, nothing is unclean of itself, but if you esteem it to be unclean, then it is unclean. You create you've been given this, you've been endowed with the same creative and authority structure as God himself. Now, not the same level of it, like by no means, like what I say, we could be equal with God. Never. But to be like him is quite natural, to decide what's right and wrong in a moment, to know what to do with something in a moment. And this is the type of life.
I want to speak about that authority structure before we move on from it. And I think you're right about it. One thing I'll point out about it is, as per the Old Testament, where we're supposed to be having a personal relationship with God, you can take that all the way back to Adam and Eve. Before they sinned, they were walking and talking with God. If we jump forward and get to the place where the children of Israel have left Egypt and they're wandering through the desert, and God is actually verbally speaking to the children of Israel, and they say, let not us hear this voice anymore. We don't want God to talk to us. Let him speak through a man, and we'll hear this man. And eventually they say, we want a king over us like the other nations. And God says, well, that's not what I have in mind for you guys. And they said, we don't care. Give us a king over us as other nations. And finally, God says, well, even though that's not what I had in mind, I'll go along with it, since that's what you desire. And personally, I believe that is what led to our King of Kings, Jesus, the man Jesus being our King of Kings, because God said, well, since you want this king over you as other nations, I'll give it to you. And I believe that is Christ. And it's through Christ that we then have our ability to have that right relationship with God again, through Christ. But I think that throughout all the time, it's that he wants a personal relationship with us. He wanted a personal relationship with the children of Israel, the prophets of old. Those are all personal, God working through individuals. And he was trying to work with the whole nation so that nation would be a light to all the other nations to bring them to God. That was the point of Israel being a thing of God, was to be a light to the other nations. And so I think God has always, we're his pinnacle of his creation. He wants a relationship with us. And it's us that lock him out and deny him. And we wanted this authority structure over us as the other nation, where we have a king, where we can just listen to a king and we don't have to have this, let us not hear the voice of God, for we may die. I think, that's very interesting and very telling. I think that same thought process, is in a lot of people, where I think the better thing to do is have a relationship with God yourself. and that's ultimately the end that is needed. If you have a relationship with God, you have a relationship with life itself, and death is our enemy. It's another thing we'll get into at some point, is our enemy is death, and God is life. God is spirit, and it's the spirit that gives life. And if we have a relationship with life, that's kind of the key to the whole thing. So I think it's interesting that when we talk about that authority structure, that God allows us now to have this man over us, in between, this one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. And I think that's interesting. To me, it shows God working with a flawed human. And you see this many times over through the Bible, where even in the building of the temple, David's like, I'm going to build the house of God. And God sends a prophet to David after he says that, and said, go tell David, when did I ever ask for him to build me a house? Or when did I tell anyone else that I needed to live in a building? I don't dwell in buildings like man does. So yeah, now but he said, since you had it in your heart to do well to me, I'm going to allow this. But it wasn't for what I had in mind originally. So I find it very interesting that God is willing to work with our flaws. But again, it does come down to he wants to work with you. So I find that interesting.
Well, we are part of creation, not just part of it. We are creation. We
pinnacle.
are the substance of creation, and I believe that God inhabited his own creation, through Christ. And, it is God incarnate. And I think recognizing that, we took something that was meant to be good, and we tainted it with our sin and our controls and our desire to be in control. Like, one of the ways we express that is, like, we love to, like, categorize, and we love to file and, name stuff and do all that stuff. And we kind of tainted look, we were built to worship. It's very natural for us to recognize authority. It was designed into us so that we could recognize the authority of God and the supreme majesty of God, and all these different types of attributes that require this cognizance of authority structure, right? And then we as humanity took that word of the serpent, that we had some kind of level of control over this, that we could be that we could be the limit or a ceiling of authority, and we separated. And the only way to make ourselves that limit of authority, to apply that structure, is to deny what's beyond it and above it, right? And so we take this very natural idea of worship and authority structure, and then we bring it down to this cap level. Well, where does it cap? Humanity. That peak, that pinnacle, as you express, And so what's left to control? We can't control this. Maybe we can control this and down. We already know that we have some control down here with the animals. We know we can't control this. So if we just pretend that this isn't, that we're separate from this, that we are separate. See, and I don't acknowledge a traditional sense of separation from material, from spiritual. I don't acknowledge that traditional separation. It's useful for our language purposes and descriptive purposes and separating things, but it's no good for combining things, that viewpoint. And when we recognize that the material is a product of the spiritual, then we are no longer distinct or separate from it. we are integral to it. It is integrated into our system. Our system has been in this. It's not like this, and then all of a sudden, here's this other thing that they can't mesh. No, this is because of this.
Mhm.
This is because of this. What? Because of God. You know, why
Mhm.
good? Because God. Why cold? Why hot? Why solid? Why whatever? These are attributes of God being expressed in a material form, is how I view this. These are just attributes. The material existence is an attribute of God held together by word, you know, and expressed by his word. And, these are attributes of him being expressed, all things to the glory of God. And when you do that and you apply it back to this material existence, although it is in itself not God, it is in, of, and through, and I don't distinguish between these. And so for humanity to start playing authority games is automatically separating us from that same hierarchical structure that exists. You have to deny this to have authority here. Your authority makes sense here, here, and here, but it stops right here.
Yeah. Yeah, all interesting points. I think we'll get into a lot of this stuff as we go. I will bring up another thing that I am unique on here that he mentioned. And this is just my opinion. I think this is, and you guys, audience out there is going to hear there's differences in our two understandings.
Yep, we're the DoubleEdgeFoundry guys.
Yep. So what I'm going to speak to right now, I know is kind of my own understanding, but nonetheless, that's what we're doing here. And so, Aramite earlier said, God in
God
basically incarnate, yes,
incarnate.
and that's where I differ in my understanding. Another way of saying that I got written down here. Somebody typed one of the in the chat one time. God in human form is another way to say that, and I don't go along with that understanding where Jesus is God. I think Jesus is a man. And I think that Jesus died and was dead for 3 days, and God raised him from the dead by his spirit, to be alive by spirit instead of how he was alive in human form, in man form, born of Mary, born of woman, and therefore was alive by blood and water and flesh and bone as we are. But when he died, and again, God can't die. So for me, that's important to understand. However, Jesus did die. And Jesus, after he was dead and raised into heaven and put at God's right hand and given all authority in heaven and on earth, notice he's given all authority in heaven and earth, not that he already had it. And when he is glorified and put at the right hand of God, he says, I was dead and am now alive forevermore. And so he, even after he is now alive by the Spirit, he says, I was dead and now I'm alive. And so I don't think God can die. I don't believe he will ever die. He's immortal. He's the only one that has immortality. Jesus died. So to me, that doesn't line up. So for me, Jesus is the Messiah. He's the Christ. He's the King of Kings. He's that man that we asked for overs. Give us a king like other nations have overs. And God's original is like, that's not my idea. I want, to rule over you directly. But he gave in, and that became Jesus. the man, the King of Kings, who now has all power over heaven and earth. So yes, now he has the power of God and all power. Nothing is withheld from him now at this point. But I believe while he was alive here on earth, alive by flesh and blood, that he was a man like I am. And I know that that's much different from your average person. And whilst I'm on this topic and outing myself there, I may as well say that also that kicks me out of the Trinity as well. I think the Trinity is false. I believe that there is one God, and that God is spirit, and that spirit gives life, just like Jesus said, God is a spirit. And in another place he said it is the spirit that gives life. And so for me, and that's why when Jesus says, this is not me speaking these next words, this is my Father speaking through me. The reason he said that over and over before he would say something is he's trying to show people this is how you're supposed to interact with reality. You're supposed to set your will aside, not my will, Lord, but your will, right? You're supposed to set your own desires aside and let God work through you. And so he was just literally telling people, look, these next words that are going to come out of my mouth are not from my own understanding. They're God speaking through me. And or when he was doing the miracles, he would say, these next things that I'm going to do is not me doing it, it's God working through me. And so for me, Jesus is showing us the right relationship that man should have with God. And so I think that and to me, again, our enemy in the Bible is death. Our enemy is mankind, is death. And Jesus showed us as a man how we overcome that enemy of death. And so, yeah, I believe that the Trinity is false. There's one God, he is spirit, and then there is Jesus, the Messiah, which is a man blessed by God. That's what an anointing is a man being blessed by God. And so I believe Jesus is that Messiah, the King of Kings, but that's a man that God is putting in this high position because we asked for it. But it's another deep conversation for another day.
And, to our listening audience, if you got, I'm sure I could foresee somebody hammering their fist down and being like, what the hell is going on? Why isn't he arguing with him right now? Like, why isn't he raising this objection and this objection and this objection? I wanted to just kind of, for any new listening audience, okay, that didn't catch first stuff, we're trying to show and exemplify a lot of the distinctions of what's different in the belief structures among beliefs, right? We just want to give you guys a chance to witness a conversation at peace, respectfully under God, that we have, we're recognizing the attributes of free will here, and peace, and being at peace with your fellow man, and doing the right thing, under God. He's entitled to his belief structure. It's between him and God.
That's right.
At the end of the day. And what we wanted you all to be able to see is two very distinct, look, we don't argue about that, two very distinct viewpoints, that and along the way, what we're hoping that you'll also be able to see, so that you don't make like one of the same mistakes I did early on of like entangling viewpoints. We just kind of wanted you to see where things can separate, how they separate between us, because he's got things that he believes in his heart and in his mind that he's got to say to be consistent with his God. And I've got things I want to say so that I can maintain my integrity and be consistent with my God.
Yes.
And in this, we believe that between us, under God, that God will take care of the problems between us, And Hugh will reveal, expose, teach, and help us to discern the truth along the way. And there are many conversations him and I had in private that started as something as an apparent disagreement, which remains an agreement, mind you, remains a disagreement. Yet God decided to teach us something more valuable, more important, and to show us more along the way, and rendering, not neutralizing our disagreement or rendering it moot, but simply showing it to be petty in nature compared to the value of the greater living God. And we really wanted you guys to see this and witness this in real time. We are two distinct theological, philosophical belief systems going on here, yet we do believe we have one objective point. And even though we might disagree on the attributes or character distinguishments of said God, we have chose to align ourselves under God, that the truth would come out and expose itself on the way. So there will be opportunity at which time I'm leading a conversation and directing the focus of this, and Broker is going to be helping me. The same way I'm going to be attempting to help him. I'm going to try to contribute to the truth that I witness, and I'm going to respond to the truth that God reveals to me along the way. I like that truth. I'll focus on that truth. I don't have to talk about the stuff I disagree with you about. I don't have to. We got truth. Let's work with that. Why work with the gross stuff? Why work with disagreements when we can work with agreements? And the disagreements will form themselves and show themselves on the way. It just happens to be an exposition, not the focus. We're not looking for disagreement.
Right.
We're just exposing it.
And for the audience out there, in my opinion, you should never take, oh, this guy is saying that Jesus is a man and not God, so I should follow him. No. Never take what I say and just put it in your life. You need, again, that connection with God. You need to go to God and you need to say, this guy's talking craziness. Is there any truth to it, or is this other way more right? Each person needs to build their own foundation under God. And actually, that's a big reason why I'm talking on this channel, is because I believe there is going to come a shaking to our world, and a lot of our understandings and belief systems are going to be tested. And if you don't have a direct connection to God to help you understand what is reality for you, then you're going to be tossed all over the place. You need to,
amen,
get in direct contact with God and make him make your foundation stable. And what helped me a lot is, if you can knock something off of your foundation, knock it off, because you're not going to be able to knock a truth off its foundation. That cornerstone is going to break your toe if you try to kick it out of the way. I mean, that's just truth. It's real. You can't make it not real. So if you can get rid of something in it, and you can get rid of it, then it probably shouldn't be there. And so test your beliefs, test your foundation, and the things that remain true, that should be your foundation. And it should be between you and God working these things out, not because I say so, or because he says so, or because your pastor says so. You need to figure that out for yourself, because when you stand before your God on Judgment Day, he's not going to say, well, you just tell me what so-and-so said and I'll judge you under their belief. No, it's going to be your belief and what you stood on, not because of it doesn't matter what other people said. What did you stand on for your truth?
Your conscience.
And so, yeah, you should have that understanding through God, not through another man. But it's always good to hear other people's opinions and say, ask God, is there any truth to what he's saying? And why not, or why so? And let your foundation be established firmly through God is kind of my big point there.
And again, you guys get to witness the removal of that authority structure in the body, right? In the sense that, like, I'm going to be responsible for what I like. Just like you said, I'm going to be responsible for what I believe. But let me tell you this: before you're so sure that you're always right, before you make that decision that, you know what, I'm committed to this, whatever, just remember, like, you don't want to get in the way of God's messengers. You see, like, if God did in fact put something on him that he felt like he needed to say, and you refuse to hear the words of God, you refuse to hear that man out, and you refuse it because it came from him and the way he believes, you know, what if God, you know, like, I'm going to point at me. God might give me a message, a good, clean, wholesome, spiritual, strong message, and I'm going to sit there and blurt out crap. I'm probably going to muddy the water on the way to whatever that message was. I'm probably going to mess up that message somehow, some way, muddy it up. But in that, if you can forgive a person of their sins and their errors and try to see through and give them an opportunity to be heard and try to see through and try to understand what truth is there. What is he holding on to that he firmly believes is truth?
Right.
He needs to be heard in this matter, and he needs help and assistance. And if it's not right, it's not right. But that's going to be him. But he needs the opportunity. And myself as a Christian, I need to be able to be prepared to give an answer and prepared to assist somebody in their beliefs. You know, whatever that might look like. I don't have to drop my integrity. I don't have to agree to help him. I don't have to agree with everything he says to point at that one thing and say, well, that part of what you said, I like it.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
It's okay, guys.
Take what applies to you in your life. Because another thing, you know, just like it says in the Bible, you know, we're not all ears, we're not all noses, we're not all eyes. So my upbringing and my childhood gives me a vantage point to view the world in a certain way. And Aramite has a completely different vantage point and a completely different upbringing. So he has the ability to see things that I'm not going to be able to see. So, and you out there, audience, you have a different upbringing, and so maybe God has something unique and special for you. We know if you make it into the kingdom, he's going to give you a white rock with a name that no one else knows, right? It's unique to you. You have a unique value that's only you, that he wants to use. And maybe you're an eye, or maybe you're an ear, and that an ear,
maybe you're this far down the path or that far down the path. It doesn't matter. Are you responding back here and here and here? You know?
Yeah. And if you're an ear,
in 3 modes.
Right. And if you're an ear, you're not going to understand something that the nose smells. Like an ear hears something. So it doesn't, well, you're talking about smell, and I don't even understand. Well, that's because you're not a nose, you know? And so what I'm pointing out there is, everyone is a unique individual and is going to have things, hopefully, if they're in relationship with God, that we can glean some good from, we can gain some value from. Not that everything you have to take you're not probably supposed to take everything from that, because they're unique in their own position as a nose. But, you know, that nose is needed in the body. And therefore, you know, we have to be open to hearing these other things. Apply what to your foundation is works, you know, is reality, is truth between you and God. And that might be a little bit different than what someone else sees or views, but that doesn't mean that it's useless. So
B, what are the 2 things that are the completion of the law, bro? You know, it's loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then loving your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
You know, no matter what side you take in all of this, one thing remains true and very clear and distinct: how you treat your neighbor, you will be held accountable to. Like, that's a rule, no matter which way you view it. No matter if you're Old Testament, New Testament, you know, Mormon, Catholic, you could be supreme orthodox. I don't know. But one thing you can't walk away from, that out of the words of the mouth of Jesus came an expression, a statement that you will treat your neighbor correctly. You know, you will treat your brethren correctly. You will treat people correctly because you're not an authority over this person. And you are no better position than him. You're in no better of a position, no stronger, no firmer of a ground, no higher up the ladder, no nothing. We're all going to stand in the same stupid spot right in front of him, on our groveling on our face, you know, like is the idea going here. So it's just give them a listen. Just give them a listen. What could it hurt? What could it hurt? File it away in somewhere and something somehow. But give your fellow person some respect. Why? Because they were made by God and they are important and relevant. Why? Because God created them and he said so. Yeah. Do you need more of a reason to hear that man out?
Right. Yep. And even, you know, loving your enemy as yourself bears into that. And it's not that, you know, you can't protect your family from someone trying to hurt them. People get this stuff conflated. But the point, in my opinion, one thing I see about loving your enemy is that if we don't have love for our enemy, how does the world get better? If your enemy is just your enemy and you hate him, right, that hate can grow and grow and you're rendering evil for evil and there's never ending. Whereas if you love your enemy and you're praying for them and you're wanting them to get in connection with God, well, if they did get in connection with God, now they're going to love you as their brother. And that kind of eliminates the enemy problem. And so, like, if the enemy doesn't respond to God and is still an enemy, that doesn't mean that you can't have been praying for him the whole time to get that connection with God. Because if your enemy did get in connection with God, he's no longer going to be your enemy. You guys are going to become loving neighbors. And so, yeah, we have enemies, and yes, we should love them and pray for them. And if through that love and prayer they become not an enemy, well, that's the point. You know, and so, yes, they may remain an enemy and come attack you, and you may need to defend your family from them. And it doesn't mean that loving your enemy, you can't save your own family, for crying out loud. But it just means that you should have a heart to want them to be in connection with God, because that makes the enemy thing go away. You know, and that's, I think,
if not, leave them alone and be separate. Be separate.
Right. So,
you know, it's fine.
Yeah, and that, as well as what you were talking about in judgment, and we're all kind of evil. Look, and there's this contradiction of, oh, judge or don't judge, and you can't judge, or you should. Look, yeah. I believe the separation there, in my understanding, or at least a big part of it, is I don't have the authority, as Space Miner was saying, to condemn a man to hell, because that authority was given to Jesus. He's been given all authority and the keys of heaven and hell and all. So he's going to decide whether you get into heaven or hell or not. But I can decide personally whether I think this other person is acting right or wrong. I definitely should judge on that, because that's happening in real time in front of you. And if they're doing evil things, you should be able to distinguish that it's an evil thing. You know, that type of judgment is obviously necessary, but it's just that you can't condemn someone in judgment of whether they get into heaven or hell, because you don't have that authority over them. So that's my take on that. But
yeah, I believe you should have enough to say, you know, to be able to predict a behavior. You know, mm-hmm. I think you can judge up to that level enough to predict and make a decision on how you're going to deal with that person.
Obviously, you know, of course, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, but really, like, what good is it beyond it? What good is your judgment beyond that?
Right.
What good is it?
That's what I think's going on there as well. We're at an hour and 20, and so I don't know if we want to wrap this one up here, or we can, you know, keep pulling on threads and keep going. What are you feeling over there? Should we?
I think we kind of covered some ground today. Um, do you feel like you got a chance to express your position?
Well, I know I need to dive a lot further into it, but I got a few things out. Yeah.
Sure. That's an endless road, bro.
Yeah.
Um, now, did you think you formed a proper found speaking foundation? Have you begin to form your platform
Yeah.
enough
Yeah, I
to
think
stand
so.
on?
I think so. Yeah. I'm coming out from the church and kind of saying there's big problems in mainstream church, and the church has become something that the church was not originally. And it for me, it definitely shouldn't be a house of God. It shouldn't have an altar. It shouldn't have a high priest. It shouldn't have uh offerings, and the high priest shouldn't be telling you whether you can or can't partake in this offering, and you're treating this thing as a temple. This was all supposed to be done away with in Christ. And and he wants a personal relationship. You are the temple of God, and if you're allowing for that spirit to fill you up, then that temple can be full of the spirit of God. And the more spirit you get in you, the more light is in your eyes, the more that you can be an example to those around you. And that's what I'm doing. I'm pointing out that we shouldn't be relying on this structure of church that has become something that is antithetical to what God wants. And so it's not that I'm just attacking, every church is, there's no saved person in any church. I'm not saying that. That's between God and those people. And I know that there's a lot of great people, and that in their heart they want what's best. And that's for God to decide where that stuff ends up. But to get to the heart of things, why is this world so far off track? Why is it so dark? Why is good evil and sweet bitter, and everything's upside down and backwards? It's because we're not. The power has left us. There was power in that, in Jesus, in the disciples, in those that were soon after Christ. There was a power there, and that power has went away, and it's us that aren't genuine. It's not that God has lost his power, or he quit working, or no, that was just for Bible times. No. God is as powerful now as he was then. He can actively work through us just as he worked through them. Remember, Jesus says you can do greater things than he was doing. See, there's this, we got off track and the power is left. We got to get back on track, and that power is going to come back onto line, because it's a reality. This stuff is real. It's real time right now. And when you treat it like, oh, that's just for Bible times, well, that separates God from our reality. And we need God in our reality every day, right now. That's our big issue, is we have a plastic, hollowed out Christian where God doesn't exist to interact. And it's only through the pastor or through that temple church or God's like, no. That's where we're way off. Get that personal relationship going. Invite him into your temple. Help to clean your temple out and clean you up, and grow you towards him. And the more you allow him to work through you, obviously that's going to be not your works. That's going to be not filthy rags works. That's going to be God's working through you, and that's going to be a beautiful thing. And that's where the power comes from. It's not that it's us. It's that we're allowing God to work through us. And if you allow God to work through you, there's going to be power there, because God is all powerful. And I think that's where we're missing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
not to be lukewarm and get spit out of his mouth, right? Like he talks about.
Yeah, dude, it's like he really, really, really just wants a response. He wants to see interaction, like interaction between us,
Exactly.
that and yeah, it's not to be like, look, like, before we're all too hard on each other, guys, we do live in a very saturated with evil world. We are very saturated in this, and we, we're demons compared to our church founders, but it's not like we're living on a tally stick, anymore. We're not up here because we believe ourselves to be wise men with great proclamations of wisdom, like, no, 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 no. Like, if there's one thing God made clear to me not long ago, like, you're not, I'm not telling you to go out because you're special or you got anything special to say. It's because nobody else is doing it. Nobody's addressing this. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody's saying that thing. They're not even being rough with their words. They're still talking to you in tulips and roses. Nobody's even raising their voice with you. And dude, if you don't do it, like, seriously, you're like kind of at the bottom of the list. There's like a lot of people that would be a lot better at this if they would just stand up and say something, but they're not. And dude, and now you guys are stuck listening to me because the next option was a rock. Yeah. And what coincidentally and quite ironically will be one of the last proclamations of the earth. Great shaking, where the rocks themselves, get to work. Well, why? Because the church will be, I believe, non-existent at that time. There will be no church to speak out. The rocks will be forced to do their work because the rocks listen to God. We don't. The rocks do what they're told. We don't. And I'm one step above a rock. How bad is it in the world right now where if you don't get me, you get a rock, bro, and you don't want the rocks to cry out, is what I'm getting at here. And we're at that time. I firmly believe it. I firmly believe we're living in that time where, guys, you get us or you get the rocks. But this voice is almost, you guys have almost, to the world, not our listening audience, to the world, these guys have all but silenced the church. They've removed us from the governments, the legislations, the cultures, the policies, the schools, the medical facilities, the educational facilities. Like, we've been all but removed.
Yeah.
And I believe that they'll finally get their way. And when the church is no longer there to protest, I think the rocks will cry out. And I think people start talking again because, now they're dealing with rocks.
Yeah. It's not going to be the 501c3 road that
those aren't going to be the guys telling you what's going on.
Yeah, it's going to be real time. It's going to be those that come out of her, my people. There's a quite ugly system at play right now, and we are uniquely formed dirt. We're the pinnacle of his creation, and if we don't submit ourselves for him to work through, which he made us a mind, just like a radio can pick up invisible radio waves, and you hear the hi-hat, the drum, the flute, the organ, you hear all the instruments individually clearly through this invisible wave through a radio. Well, God made us out of all the elements of the earth, dirt and metals and fluids, and we're a combination of all these elements, and he made us uniquely so that we can communicate with him. And if we deny that communication, then the rocks might have to cry out, because that's the whole reason the whole creation was created. And we're the pinnacle of it, but obviously he wants to work through us. And here we are trying to say, like the children of Israel did, no, don't let God talk to me, tell a man, and then that man can tell me. And like, this is or Adam and
just
Eve,
make
right?
A law to make this go away? Can't we just make a law, rule, policy to make this go away? How much money is this going to cost to make this go away?
Yeah, the law is a big thing we'll get into in future, and Eremite has a lot.
Got me fired. Why you fire me up? Fire up the forge. Time to shut it down.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to say on the law. Eremites had some good talks with me and pointed out some things that have really been revealing to me about the law, and that's really spoke to him. So I'm sure we'll get into that in future sessions. So
You know, make me a king, make me a law, give me a president, let me vote. You know, let me just, I paid my insurance, you know, I'm in control. I'm in control of my destiny and my future, and I've got my own security in hand.
Yep.
Let me
you can see us building these false illusionary realities that we want to be satisfied. We want to. It's like there's a reality at play here, guys, and you can't just make it how you want it to be. The reality is what the reality is, and either you're gonna plug yourself into that, or you're gonna continue to live in this false reality. And there is a governmental system that is on paper that they're trying to get you to sign up for, and this is not that system that we're talking about. This is a direct communication with God system that we're talking. This is something that was there from the beginning, but has been pushed off by a lot. And I think, like we were talking earlier, we're coming down to a head over all this civilizations where we push it off, try to create our own reality. And now we're living in a world where evil is good and good is evil, and bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter, and everything's upside down, and it's gross, and I just want out of it. But we can't get out of it because we've entrenched ourselves within it. And there's a reality at play here, and I'm only trying to get to reality, the truth. I don't care about finally I don't care about what my pastor thinks, because I don't have one anymore. I don't care about what my family thinks, because I'm individually trusting God as my boss. I no longer need to go anywhere else to find my answers. Now, I love talking with other people and other opinions, because I can obviously gain from truths that they have and truths that other people have, and I won't take all of it because it's not fitting to me. But what God will allow for me and wants for me, that I want. And so, but it really should come down to between you and God, what you accept and don't accept, and don't just take other people's words for it. Go to God with it. Let him show you what you should establish as your base, because there's going to be a big shaking, like we were saying, and it's going to be hard to see truth if you're not already kind of figuring these things out.
Yeah, and we're just pointing at Jesus, y'all. We're saying, you know what? All things else aside, just like focus on that guy.
Yep. And I want to point out,
focus right there.
Yep. I want to point out, even though we have very different kind of theologies on this, I say that Jesus is the Messiah. I say that Jesus is the King of Kings. I say that there is no way to the Father but through him. And I think that Eremite would agree with all those things.
I can say any one of those with pride.
And so, even though we differ in a few areas, so much of that is the same. We still are pointing at Jesus, even though for me, he's a man that is now given all authority in heaven and earth. And I think with Eremite, he can speak for himself, but I think it's more that he is a
Jesus
part of
is God incarnate, man.
God incarnate. So either way, we're both saying you're gonna have to submit to him as King of Kings and as the Messiah.
The choice is how you deal with the person Jesus. At the end of the day, that's the big decision. What are you going to do with this person? And the answer you're going to have to give is to that person.
And I would say,
not us.
And I would say,
even before
what's that?
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was just saying, like we're sitting here comfortable, you and I. We have no problem. I can say what I need to say. You can say what you need to say, because we don't care. Like, I care. I care about you, bro. Broker, you're a brother. I care about you. That being said, I ain't got to answer to you.
Right.
I'll speak freely because he's the one I got to answer to. And when I get in front of him, I might be hot, I might be cold, but buddy, I ain't going to be lukewarm.
Yeah, at least don't be standing on my beliefs. Be standing on your own beliefs and get shot down for your own beliefs, not for someone else's beliefs.
Yeah, that was what I wanted to say earlier real quick, is that, look, It's simple. Like, it's so easy to be honest. I don't have an answer for that. It's okay to not always have an answer, to not always have a response. Like, it's going to happen. There's no way you could be prepared for every intellectual situation on earth. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And so that being said, it's believe, believe and know and understand three things about three things. Have your own belief. Know. Don't, and if you don't know, don't pretend you know. It's simple, and you'll never look like an ass. Just, if you know it, then just talk about the thing you know. Why? Because you can argue for the thing you know. You can explain the thing you know. You can reason the thing you know. So if you don't know, you don't know. Who cares? Be careful to speak what you do know, and if you know it, you ain't got nobody to be ashamed of, because the only one to judge you is going to be God. That's the only one that's going to make a difference. It's the only reason it matters, that choice.
Yeah.
And again, lastly, at the end of the day, it's all about that choice. What have you done? What kind of relationship do you have with that person? End of story. And that's going to be between you two.
Yeah.
End of story. I hope I can help you on the way. I'll try to be responsible with what I say.
Yep, and we'll dive deeper into those areas as we go forward. I think we can probably try to button this one up for this time. And,
yeah, I'm good with that.
And all right, cool. And yeah, we'll dive further into all of these topics going forward. This was another just kind of, we've had a couple. This is our second. And we're just kind of trying to get people to understand where we're kind of coming from, so we can kind of get this thing going and off the ground. Eventually, I think we're going to hit certain topics a little bit harder and in depth. We'll have our conversation from time to time, but a lot of these are going to be deep dives into a certain area, like one on worship. I have a lot to say about worship and how people view worship and whether it should even be a thing or not. The church, we
got a
can
lot
talk
to say
about
the law.
Jesus is a man, the law. Yeah, there's lots of rapture, the timing, there's so many different things that we can jump into, and we're going to, and we're going to try to help each other open that conversation up, instead of the debate forum where we cut, no, you're wrong because of X, Y, and Z. We're going to say, oh, that's your view. Well, how does it work here? And can you open that up for me and explain it more? And so we're trying to get our views opened as much as possible so that people can pick apart what they think is good and not, and take what's good and leave the rest. And it will help us too. When I can explain how I view these things, and he can open them up and pick them apart, and I'm sure I'm going to see things that, I was wrong there, and actually I think I am right there, and that's what we're trying. We're trying to help grow each other and the audience, and we do have different understandings on these things, but instead of condemning the other person for that, we're going to try to bring as much out of that conversation as we can. And hopefully that
honest confessions, and
we'll be able to gain more out of a subject, instead of the subject being collapsed because it's being attacked by the other person's viewpoint. I see that a lot in debates, and we're kind of trying to take a new format instead of the debate, which actually the Bible kind of talks about you shouldn't debate like that. But debates can be good, but what we're doing is we're trying to open the subject up more, especially for the person who's seeing it. And instead of, someone will try to express their view, but it gets shut down because the other person doesn't have that view. And so that point never gets expressed. We want to express it and pull everything out of it that we can. And then you can shoot it down later if you want to. But that's the idea here, is to pull as much truth out of these things as we can, as we see them. And, hopefully you out there as the audience can fill in some of our missing links. And with that, I guess I'm good to wrap up. Would you like to add anything before we shut her down here?
Shoot, man. No, thank you, audience, if you've been attending, and appreciate having you guys there. And hopefully we'll be able to interact soon enough. So with that, appreciate you, broker. Appreciate your chat, and y'all have fun now.
All right. Yep. Thank you very much, Eremite. And we will be back with another one soon. And yes, we are going to try to take these live once we get the audience built up. We need a certain amount of people subscribing before we can access the live. So when we get there, we'll be taking these live to interact with you. That's what we're excited about. And until then, we'll keep these subjects rolling. And with that, we will catch you all on the next one. Thanks, everybody.